A very warm welcome to all the dignitaries present here, all the national and international participants from across the globe, colleagues and my dear friends, to the second day of the NCAVES India Forum 2021. Before starting with today's session, it's our pleasure to inform you that the first day of the NCAVES India Forum on 14th of January 2021 witnessed a remarkable response from all over the globe. The recordings of the earlier session is available at our forum site. So in case if you have missed some of the sessions, you can visit ncavesindiaforum.in. We are now all geared up for the second day of the forum, which is basically focused on the theme of policy demands for natural capital accounting in India. We as statisticians are the custodian of data and statistics, but the data will not have sufficient relevance unless these finds a place in designing a policy, because ultimately it is the policy that reaches the masses. It is the policy that has the potential of bringing a sea change in every aspect of the society. Our role thus confines to providing good quality data for framing policies that are data-driven and policies that do not suffer due to lack of data. We have had many rich experiences and discussions on the first day of the forum by eminent dignitaries from all over the world. To recapitulate the discussions of day one, we have the privilege of having with us Dr. Mamta Saxena, Director General, Coordination and Administration, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Dr. Mamta Saxena has had an extensive exposure to data sources across several environmentally relevant domains, like those of agriculture, horticulture, water resources, and has also been in charge of the compilation of the national accounts. Her guidance at various stages of the project has been immensely useful to us. Without wasting much time, I now request Dr. Mamta Saxena, Director General, Coordination and Administration, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, to give a brief recapitulation of the sessions of day one and walking us through the plan for today's session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. A very good afternoon to all of you. We have had a very interesting first session of NCAVES India Forum on 14th January. The Natural Capital Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services NCAVES project, as we know, began in 2017 to help nations advance knowledge on environmental economic accounting that can help nations in ensuring sustainable economic growth. Currently, the NCAVES project is being implemented in 5 countries: India, Brazil, China, Mexico, and South Africa. The Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has taken several initiatives under NCAVES project during the past 3 years, with the view to highlight the uses to which natural capital accounts can be put, especially in the areas of decision making and policy analysis. The first session of the event started with the address of Dr. Chhatrapati Shivaji, Secretary MOSPI, who gave a synoptic view of initiatives being taken in environmental accounting under the Vision 2024 of MOSPI. He highlighted that the adoption of the system of environmental economic accounting, SEIA, is one of the key initiatives taken by the ministry in the line with this vision to strengthen India's national statistical system to provide timely inputs for policy and stronger dissemination practices for public. A report of the NCAVES project in India was released by the Honorable Minister of Statistics and Program Implementation, Rao Inderjeet Singh, in this session. The report is also available on the website of our ministry, MOSPI. Thereafter, in his address, the Honorable Minister Rao Inderjeet Singh emphasized and reiterated that the ministry is committed for timely generation and dissemination of data for evidence-based policy making as well as decision making, and also intended to improve the robustness and coverage of the environmental accounts. There was also an address by Mr. Ugo Estuto, Honorable Ambassador of the European Union to India, who complimented MOSPI on its efforts and stressed the importance of natural capital accounting to build science-based, data-driven policies and in monitoring their implementation. He emphasized that environmental economic accounting can provide an important foundation for a solid monitoring framework and a benchmark for business, national and global ambitions. He also stressed on the timeliness of the project and the urgency to act for a green and sustainable future. The presentations by Bert Kroes, chair of the UN Committee of Experts on Environmental Economic Accounting, and Gemma van Helderen, director UN ESCAP, emphasized on the need to implement the SIA framework to enable decisions that can ensure sustainability. The panel discussion with Stephen Schweinfest, director UNST, Susan Gardner, director UNEP, Karen Erika Kemper, director World Bank, and Dr. Shelja Sharma, Director General Statistics as panelists, was moderated by Mr. Praveen Srivastava, ex-CSI of India. The panelists shared their rich experiences and complimented MOSPI for the achievements made under the NCAVES project. They also pointed out that SIA can help in assessing the sustainability of economic growth by accounting for the changes in the stocks and flows of natural resources and the environment. There was a lot of scope for sharing of best practices and peer learning with over 80 countries now implementing SIA. The panelists emphasized that the integrated framework of the SIA will enable better monitoring of the SDGs, climate change, and the post-2020 biodiversity framework. The panel discussion focused basically on the SIA. Moreover, the efforts made by MOSPI were also complemented in this domain. The deliberations were intellectually enlightening for all the stakeholders across the world. We have an equally interesting lineup scheduled for today. Today's discussions will begin with the address by Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. He would be giving his address on the statistical system for MEAs and policy. This would be followed by a session on role of environmental accounts in policy. During this session, we would be listening to speeches and presentation from Dr. K. Vijay Raghavan, Principal Scientific Advisor, Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor, Ministry of Finance, and Shri Ram Mohan Johari, Director General, Office of Comptroller and Auditor General of India. These speakers will help highlight the need for environmental accounting as seen by policymakers. Climate change is a phenomena which is not bound by boundaries and observed and felt globally. To speak on the requirements of environment data to monitor climate change, we have Vlad UN Framework Convention of Climate Change. We would be moving next from the policymakers to the other main stakeholders group, the businesses, where we have speakers from FICCI and CII briefing the work done on environment accounting and their expectations from the National Statistical System. Dr. Ajay Mathur Terry would enlighten us on ecosystems and resource efficiency. We are absolutely privileged that we have on our speaker list today the key people of three organizations pivotal to the concept of environmental accounting. We have Inger Anderson, Under Secretary General and Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme, Elizabeth Maruma Mrema, Executive Secretary, Convention of Biological Diversity, and Elliot Harris, Assistant Secretary General and Chief Economist of the UN. We do hope that there will be several takeaways from today's discussions, not just for NS India, but also for all other stakeholders. On my personal behalf, I wish the event success and would be keenly following up on the developments in this domain in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for highlighting some of the very important points of day one and giving us highlights. And we are sure of your wishes that have always been with us throughout the project. Before we proceed, we will now have a short video on the concept of natural capital accounting and the system of environmental economic accounting to sensitize the participants who have joined us today. Over to the video, please. Thank you.
Imagine you're a manager of a company that makes silk clothing. The machinery in which you have invested and maintained over the years helps your employees create a steady stream of high-quality products for your customers. Now imagine your profits becoming tight and you start to take shortcuts, neglecting the maintenance of your machinery and overworking your staff. Soon you realize the flow of silk products starts to slow and the quality gets poorer. But at least, in the short term, you are still able to make a profit. However, over time, even profits disappear. To understand what's happening and to try and prevent your company going out of business, you investigate why. You find the evidence in your company accounts, in your balance sheets and profit and loss statements. Now try thinking about nature in the same way. Imagine nature as a store of wealth or natural capital which delivers a constant flow of benefits to society, such as filtered water, wood, and coastal protection. It's a pretty simple leap of imagination. If we don't conserve natural capital, if we don't invest in nature as an asset, its flow of benefits to our society will decline, much like the products from our company. But most of the time, we don't look at nature this way. Instead, we see it as an endless source of bounty or as a sink in which to pour the end products of unsustainable production and consumption. Each year, this natural capital is responsible for producing trillions of dollars worth of goods and services globally. Without this contribution, our economies and societies could not flourish. Despite its importance, we do not adequately account for our natural capital. Perhaps if we did, we wouldn't run it down like we do. So, how can we better account for nature in our decision making? First, we need to understand what is natural capital. Natural capital is another term for the stock of renewable and non-renewable resources such as plants, animals, air, water, soils, minerals. Natural capital, sometimes in combination with human inputs such as labor or machinery, generates flows of benefits to people such as coastal protection. The contribution of ecosystems to these benefits are called ecosystem services. Through a global process led by the United Nations, the system of environmental economic accounting, or the SEA, is the statistical framework in support of natural capital accounting. It is an internationally agreed framework for producing internationally comparable statistics on the environment and its relationship with the economy based on standard concepts, definitions, classifications, and accounting rules. So, what does the SEER allow us to measure? The SEER consists of accounts compiled in physical and monetary units. The SEER ecosystem accounts allows to measure the extent and condition of our ecosystems and where they are located in the landscape. The SEER also measures the ecosystem services provided by the ecosystems as well as who benefits from them. This makes the contributions of nature to well-being visible. With natural capital accounting, we can also determine the monetary value of ecosystem services from specific forests or river catchments or the stock of carbon in our forests in a way that is comparable to the value of buildings or roads, for example. This is vital to mainstream ecosystems and biodiversity in economic decision-making. Having a more comprehensive picture of the state of natural capital can help countries develop more holistic measures of their progress and thereby complementing more traditional measures such as gross domestic product. The SEER is also used to measure progress towards the 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals and will contribute to the development and implementation of the monitoring framework of the Global Biodiversity Framework currently under development. India has been compiling and publishing environmental statistics since 1997. Being part of the Natural Capital Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services project has enabled the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation to set up the SEER implementation, advance its capacity for natural capital accounting. India joins more than 80 other countries around the world implementing the SEER. Implementing the SEER, natural capital accounting can be integrated into national accounts to help decision makers in policy and planning and to fully account for all our natural capital. Find out how India is implementing the SEER at mospi.gov.in.
I'm sure you have enjoyed this short video. We now move on to our next session for the day. We do realize that the importance of data related to the environment forms the foundation to a sound environmental policy, a policy which actually meets the requirements and the priorities of the society. These policies then have the ability to percolate to a level that casts a significant impact on the overall behavior and perceptions of the masses. Having talked about the relevance of the government schemes, may I now request Ms. Anshu Singh, Deputy Director General, Statistics, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, to elucidate on the mechanisms set up under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change to ensure the availability of the right information at the right time. Ms. Anshu has taken several initiatives as and improved a reporting of statistics related to the different facets of environment. With these words, I would like to request ma'am to kindly address this very intellectual gathering present here. Ma'am.
Thank you so much. Esteemed speakers, our seniors, and all the people in the gathering. I would now begin speaking on this issue. Most environment problems have a transboundary nature and often a global scope, and they can be addressed effectively through international cooperation. And for this, India has been taking an active part in the elaboration, ratification, and implementation of multilateral environmental agreements. And in order for meeting the commitments of these agreements, data systems have been set in place within the ministry and also outside. So the matters addressed by these agreements are very wide: biodiversity and nature protection, climate change, protection of the ozone layer, desertification, management of chemicals and waste, transboundary water and air pollution, to name a few. In all of these fields, India is a leading proponent of international environmental action and cooperation and an active player committed to promote worldwide the concept of sustainable development. Each of these multilateral environmental agreements have been endorsed at the national level through rules and regulations and also government-funded schemes so that India is able to achieve its commitments made under these agreements. For instance, India is on track to achieve 2 of the 3 components of the Paris target. First, India has already reduced emissions intensity by 21%, given its target to reduce it by 30 to 35% of GDP by 2030. Second, with around 38% of non-fossil fuel capacity, which includes renewables, large hydro and nuclear, India is just 2% short of its 2030 target of 40% of the installed non-fossil fuel electricity capacity. For supporting and furthering these achievements, India aims to install an ambitious 175 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2022 and 450 gigawatts by 2030. India already has 90 gigawatts of renewable energy, representing nearly 24% of the total installed capacity. It has some of its lowest solar tariffs globally, dropping to nearly 1.99 kilowatt hour, and the thermal capacity has declined from 70% in 2015 to 61% in 2020. The India Cooling Action Plan and the government's FAME 2 scheme are some other initiatives that the government has taken up for the purpose. In another move that reaffirms India's seriousness to walk the talk on climate change, India has constituted a high-level interministerial EPICS committee for implementation of the Paris Agreement. The purpose of this EPICS committee is to generate a coordinated response on climate change matters that ensures that India is on track towards meeting its obligations under the Paris Agreement, including the nationally determined contributions. The key to good governance and apt policy formulation is good data. Robust, good quality data can help in evaluating schemes for optimal resource allocation, and therefore the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change places a lot of emphasis on research and data collection. This ministry is the nodal agency in the central government for overseeing the implementation of India's environment and forest policies and programs relating to conservation of the country's natural resources, including lakes and rivers, its biodiversity, forests and wildlife, and ensuring the welfare of animals and prevention and abatement of pollution. While implementing these policies and programs, the ministry is guided by the principle of sustainable development. It is also the nodal agency for the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, South Asia Cooperative Environment Programme, and the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICMOD. It is responsible for the submission of the mandatory reports under the various multilateral environmental agreements. Be it the exploration, survey, inventorizing and monitoring of protected areas, forests and other ecosystems, or the faunal and floral diversity across the country, the ministry has institutionalized the use of the latest technologies, including the use of GIS and remote sensing data sets, so that timely information is made available for framing the necessary interventions in time. The institutions like the Botanical Survey of India, the Zoological Survey of India, the Forest Survey of India, and the Wildlife Institute of India are a regular to the international conferences, and this is a testimony to their reputation and expertise that they have built over the years. The ministry recognizes the importance of conserving India's natural diversity and has enunciated several policy instruments and action programs to develop a holistic approach for issues having a direct bearing on conservation and sustainable use of natural resources, including forestry and wildlife. Project Tiger and Project Elephant are well-known success stories internationally, where state-of-the-art technologies are being used for the census. India has recently announced an increase in the population of several important wildlife species like the leopard and the sarus crane, all of which can be attributed to the commitment to saving the wildlife of the country. The ministry is executing a nationwide program of ambient air quality monitoring known as National Air Quality Monitoring Program, NAM. Presently, the network consists of 731 monitoring stations covering 312 cities or towns in 29 states and 6 union territories across the country under the NAM. 3 criteria of pollutants, that is PM10, particulate matter having an aerodynamic diameter less than or equal to 10 micrometers, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide is being monitored regularly at all the locations. In addition, there are 148 continuous ambient air quality monitoring stations in 86 cities in the country. For attending to water pollution, the Central Pollution Control Board is in association with the SPCBs, that is the State Pollution Control Boards and the Pollution Control Committees, is regularly monitoring water quality of aquatic resources across the country through a network of 3,500 monitoring stations, including 1,821 monitoring locations on rivers, 473 monitoring locations on lakes, ponds, tanks, 52 monitoring locations on creeks, seawater, coastal areas, 53 monitoring locations on canals and drains, 50 monitoring locations on STPs, 10 on water treatment plants, and 989 monitoring locations on wells under the National Water Quality Monitoring Program. These monitoring mechanisms are connected in hub and spoke model to the ministry to ensure that the information is available for the purposes of policy formulation and decision making. The ministry is implementing NCAVES, a central sector scheme, through a network of 68 NCAVES, that is Environment Information System, hubs and resource partners, of which 32 hubs are hosted by the respective state government or union territory administrations, and 36 RPs are hosted by environment-related government and non-government organizations or institutes of professional excellence with varied thematic mandates pertaining to environment, forest, climate change, pollution abatement, health, and hygiene. The primary mandate of the scheme is to collect and disseminate information relating to a variety of themes associated with environment, forest, wildlife, and climate change sectors. NCAVES regularly brings out value-added information products relating to environment, forest, wildlife, and climate change. These include theme-based newsletters, special publications, thematic bulletins, technical reports, discussion forums, directories of information at state, regional, national levels. India is continuously attempting to institute and improvise its data systems to enable monitoring of the commitments envisaged in the national legislation and the multilateral environmental agreements. For instance, the biennial update report is submitted to UNFCCC in respect of the greenhouse gas emissions and associated issues. The National Convention reporting for the Convention on Biodiversity is done regularly. Data is submitted on the issues relating to waste-related conventions like the Basel, Stockholm, Minamata, SASM, and the Montreal Protocol. National reporting required in respect of land degradation neutrality for UNCCD, the Convention on Desertification, is also furnished regularly. Data for air pollutants generated by the Continuous Air Quality Ambient System and NAM is available as open source data for all. Data generated by water quality monitoring stations is inspected as per protocol and also compiled for monitoring. Data for the Ramsar sites is made available as per requirement of NITI Aayog and MOSPI. Data on species, flora and fauna by institutions like BSI and ZSI that can help in mapping the biodiversity of the country is also being compiled regularly. Similarly, data compilation has been attempted and shared with MOSPI for the indicators on SDGs pertaining to environment, specifically goals 13 relating to climate change and 15 relating to life on land, although this is still a work in progress. Further, a variety of research is undertaken by the divisions of MOFCC and institutions like the Forest Survey of India associated with the ministry Studies on ecosystem services of forests, coastal areas, etc. are also undertaken. These may constitute the basis for the environmental accounts. As the country progresses, more systems would be put in place and refined. With the globally primed focus on the environment and climate change, it is pertinent that all nations work in unison for the betterment of the nature and humanity at large. Using the natural resources responsibly by each and every section of the society has become the need of the hour. These initiatives enable in developing a mechanism which will ensure sustainability and also help in protecting and preserving nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshu, for your valuable address. It's clear that the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change is leaving no stones unturned to provide key information for policy. Of course, as you've rightly pointed out, this will be immensely useful for us to understand the areas where we can venture to develop the next set of accounts. We now move ahead with our next session, wherein we have discussions on the role of environment accounts in policy, much in context to our today's theme of policy demands for NCAs in India. Before starting the session, I just wanted to remind all the participants that we do have a provision for asking questions through chats. Please do send us your queries and we shall try to get them addressed during this forum. We are extremely delighted to have a pre-recorded message from Professor K. Vijay Raghavan, the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. Professor Vijay Raghavan is a prestigious Padma Shri Award winner and has been the Secretary of Department of Biotechnology, Government of India. He has taken up several initiatives as the Principal Scientific Advisor, including the formation of missions on biodiversity and oceans, which aim to help the country achieve the goals of sustainable development and well-being through an effective implementation of science, technology, and innovative solutions. We will now be playing the message from Professor Vijay Raghavan.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having me at the National Capital Accounting of Environmental Valuation. This is a very important topic, and first of all, I'd like to congratulate the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation for organizing this and releasing the report earlier. I would like to also say that this particular session on the role of environment accounts in policy is a very important one. Very briefly, we have gone through 4 industrial revolutions where the focus has largely been on the quality of the products, its frugal availability, and the maximum distribution across the world. This has traditionally not paid full attention to environmental issues. My favorite examples, which have been cited by well-known economists, are 2. The chainsaw is an extraordinary invention, but while it allows furniture to be made on scale, it also has problems in damaging the environment. And therefore, the costing of what we produce by using this chainsaw should take the environmental damage into account. Another example is fishing, deep sea fishing trawlers. They too provide us food, fish, on a scale never before imagined, but the environmental costs are often not factored into the pricing of the produce we get from them. These are important examples for 2 other reasons. One, as we have witnessed during the pandemic, not paying attention to the environment increases the possibility of human and other animal contact in contexts where zoonotic spillover can take place. This is not just in areas where there are wet markets, but even in areas where poultry, other kinds of livestock interact closely with humans. And therefore here too, environmental attention has to be paid to avoid pandemics and spillovers, and this is a lesson which we have learned the hard way in 2020. The next point is about the costs in terms of pollution to our health and to the well-being of the environment. And that we can see in large environmental crises which have come up because of a cumulative disregard for attention in our large garbage dumps, for example. Ghazipur in the Delhi area is an example, but there also are rivers and our air. So these matters need to be addressed very speedily, not just by direct action, which is most important, but also by valuation of the costs of projects in terms of the impact on the environment, and taking every measure to ensure that that valuation is included in current pricing so that we pay for taking care of our environment. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you for elucidating on the need of environmental accounting. This just reinforces our commitment towards making nature's value visible. We have another keen advocate for the concept of natural capital accounting amongst our policy makers, Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor, Department of Economic Affairs. With a rich academic background, he was named the Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum in 2010. He has also been keenly following up on the developments in India on the natural capital accounting. It is our privilege to share with you a message from Dr. Sanyal, conveying his thoughts on the forum and the use of the accounts. May we have the message, please?
Greetings to everyone at the National Capital Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services India Forum 2021. This is a very important initiative at multiple levels. Of course, the centerpiece of this is the idea of putting valuations on nature, on environmental services, ecosystem services, and so on. And the reason for doing this is obvious. That which you do not measure does not get managed. And this is a serious issue, not something we have discovered recently, but it is a serious issue that has been there right from the very beginning when national accounts began to be put together back in the 50s. And it was this, that the exclusive... Greetings to everyone at the National Capital Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services India Forum 2021. This is a very important initiative at multiple levels. Of course, the centerpiece of this is the idea of putting valuations on nature, on environmental services, ecosystem services, and so on. And the reason for doing this is obvious. That which you do not measure does not get managed. And this is a serious issue, not something we have discovered recently, but it is a serious issue that has been there right from the very beginning when national accounts began to be put together back in the 50s. And it was this, that the exclusive focus of national accounts on a particular kind of economic activity at the exclusion of natural and social capital has meant that we have a very peculiar measurement of human progress and human welfare. Whereas we all know that natural capital has such a big role to play in our quality of life in terms of how we are adding to or subtracting from the national capital. So, in that context, it is very important the work that is now getting done in this field, putting dollars and rupees valuations to these services so that we can make genuine trade-offs about the kind of decisions we make as policymakers and society makes in terms of the kinds of trade-offs that it endorses. So I think this is a very, very good start. Personally, I'm very, very happy about this, of course, because some 20 years ago, I, along with a group of scholars, began to pioneer and explore this area of environmental valuations. In fact, India was one of the first countries, in fact, if not the first country, where systematic effort was put towards putting valuations to ecosystem services. And many of these scholars, such as Haripriya Gudimida, Pavan Sukhdev, and so on, have gone on to make very valuable contributions in this field. And now many of those techniques which we had pioneered are now global standards. So to bring it back here in India and begin to apply it systematically across the country and to hopefully incorporate it in some way into our day-to-day decision making here in the government would be an absolutely fabulous way to go about it. And so let me end by saying all the very best to all the researchers and scholars who have been working in this field, and look forward to taking this conversation further. Thank you very much.
We are so happy that we got Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal to speak to us, advocating the use of environmental accounting. Continuing our discussion on the role of environment accounts in policies, we have now with us Mr. Ram Mohan Johri, Director General Government Accounts, Office of Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Mr. Johri has been closely associated with the CAG's concept paper on natural resource accounting, and we shall now be listening to him about the use of environmental accounting in monitoring and planning the government expenditure. Over to you, sir.
Good day. It is indeed a pleasure to address the NCAVES forum, and especially the UNEP, European Union, NITI Aayog, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and MOSPI, because they have played a very stellar role in seeing this conference becomes a reality. This is a special day. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, so I'll have to say it again, I think. Well, it's indeed my pleasure to address the NCAVES forum, and especially UNEP, European Union, NITI Aayog, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and MOSPI, to see this particular forum become a reality. Today happens to be a special day in the sense.
Sir, sorry, I need to interrupt you. I think, sir, your video is not yet switched on. Can you please switch it on?
Well, from my side, it's on.
Okay, so please hold on. Sir, we are not able to get your video. Can you please hold on for a minute?
Yeah. Is it? Do I log out and log in again?
Yes, sir, please. I think we are not able to get your video streamed.
Okay,
We're not able to see the video, sir.
Just a second, please.
Yes, sir.
Is it fine now?
Hello. Sorry, sir. Though we are though you're audible, but we are still not able to receive the video, sir. Can you start sharing your screen? Your presentation might be.
I'll just speak. In that case, you can just record the voice. Huh? That's
Yes,
if it's not there. Fine.
sir.
Go ahead. No problem. Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
please continue.
Here we go. Yeah, today happens to be a special day. Actually, it's 21st of January 2021, and the 46th President of US has already given executive orders for the Paris Accord. So that's a good news for all the environmentalists for that moment. And in fact, it is indeed a great pleasure to address the NCAVES forum. Well, we have spoken about the environment. We have talked about what India is doing. Perhaps few things needs to be added, that we were very instrumental in having the International Solar Alliance initiative, which would reduce the carbon footprint. And in fact, PM Modi has been awarded Champions of Earth Award from UN Secretary General in his extensive efforts to beat the plastic pollution and the pledge to eliminate single-use plastics by 2022. Well, mankind in its quest for rapid economic development has used natural resources to serve its short-term interests and in the process harm nature. This has resulted in environmental degradation. Perhaps that is the reason there is a talk about sustainable economic development. Some of the issues which are being discussed at the international forums are global warming, increasing carbon footprint, scarcity of fresh water, depleting groundwater, air and water pollution, and increased use of plastics. All these phenomena we know is a reality. It is happening. But what is the reason behind it? What contributes to it? Are we in a position to measure the reasons and then the corrective actions can follow? The reason that we are not able to measure these harmful impact is that the conventional accounting captures data only on the measurable economic activity. And for non-measurable activities, other advanced methods of accounting are needed. So in order to capture the intimate interplay between the man-made environment and the various components of the natural environment, the concept of national resource accounting has emerged. And there is a need for preparation of national resource account. The basic concept here is that the measurement of a resource leads to its better management. The idea here is to quantify the adverse impact of the economic development on the environment and to adjust or reduce it from GDP to arrive at the green GDP, essentially signifying the impact of economic development on environment and sustainable growth. So that is the main idea which we have in mind, that it is to be achieved. Now, what is the present situation? Well, it has already been pointed out, India is already a signatory to the UN General Assembly resolution transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. There is a current proposal for assessing and measuring SDG number 12, 13, 14 and 15 and linking with environment and climate change. There are 25 environment-related targets which are required to be monitored as per the commitment given by India to UN. The particular attention is to target 15.9, which talks about integrate ecosystem biodiversity values into national and local planning, development processes, poverty reduction strategies and accounts. So making national resource accounts is not a wishful thinking. It is a requirement. A commitment has already been made. What would be the benefits of it? That is something which we have to think about. We all talk about damage, but we are not able to judge the extent of damage, how it is to be measured. So if you want to quantify the extent of damage or degradation to environment as a result of the environment, then perhaps national resource accounts is the way out. This will raise the question whether economic development is real development and is it sustainable or not. This would also assist in documenting the reasons for damage degradation so that corrective action can be initiated. If you know that soil water degradation or air degradation is happening due to these reasons, and this is the contribution of certain factors to it, then perhaps remedial action can be taken. So policy initiatives can be taken, but you should be able to measure it to be able to know that what is the most important reason and where the corrective action requires to be taken. And in fact, certain efforts have been initiated by the government to mitigate the adverse impacts on the environment. Certain amount is also being spent. There are certain flagship schemes also which have been initiated. So if you want to form an opinion on their adequacy, then perhaps you will have to measure the impact which is having on sustainable environment. So this will give lead to the policy makers for the areas of concern where direct interventions or policy initiatives need to be taken to remedy the situation. Then there is a conceptual framework. It has already been talked about, CRCF framework, but that is only a framework which gives broad guidelines. But if that framework has to become a reality, what would be the type of accounts which need to be made? So there are basically three accounts: the asset accounts, the supply use tables, and functional accounts. And MOSPI is doing a very good job in respect of asset accounts and supply and use tables. But as far as functional accounts are concerned, this relates to those transactions and other informations in which some expense has been incurred or some revenue is flowing into the government accounts. At the moment, it is captured under different heads as per the accounting system which is approved for Government of India. We have taken an initiative that all things which are related to environment protection expenditure account should be included as a part in the notes to accounts to the finance accounts of Government of India. So at one place, all the efforts in terms of expenses incurred for environment protection can be clubbed and brought under this head, which will give a ready-made information about the expense incurred. And we can always evaluate that whether this expense is worth it if we are able to measure its impact on the environment. Well, the entire process of national resource accounting is broadly in three steps. The first step is the physical accounting. The second step is the monetary valuation. And the third step is the integration with economic accounting. Well, we are still at stage one, the physical accounting. And in fact, once that is for a country of the size of India, that is a very, very complicated proposition. So we have highlighted four resources, that is land, water, forest, and mineral energy resources, in which efforts are being done to do the physical accounting. After that, when a monetary evaluation will come into place, and then comes the stage of its integration with the economic accounting. Well, there are certain issues which we have to be very careful about. In fact, we had certain preliminary discussions with Government of India ministries and departments and a number of government agencies, both at the center and the state level. And there were issues which make the process both challenging and long drawn. Some of the issues are that there are multiplicity of agencies at Government of India and the state level collecting data. Then perhaps government will have to notify that which is the agency which will be responsible for collecting data, what would be the format of that data, what is the frequency at which that data would be collected, how this data would be collected, collated, summarized and presented as information for decision making. Then there are certain questions about the data availability also. Like data about land is done once in 5 years, water once in 3 years. And when you do water, there is a concept of a water year, which is, it does not tally with your financial year or the calendar year. It's 31st of October and 31st of May. So we'll have to make ways to see that this data is available as on a particular day so that it becomes more reliable. So perhaps when the question of reliability of data comes, there is a need for education and training of persons. The persons who will be responsible for collecting data initially and the persons who will be summarizing it, collating it and presenting it in the form of an information. There are certain challenges about certain natural resources which has to be based on estimates and presumptions. So what are the estimates and presumptions which we would use? Are they internationally acceptable? whether they'll give the degree of reliability which we have in mind will have to be thought about. In fact, let me give you an example. Like minerals, it is based on ground surveys on a sample basis, and the actual extraction will depend upon the technologies used. So these are the challenges which we have to keep in mind, so that the information which comes out in the data which we collect is far more reliable and becomes a basis for making accounts and further decision making. In fact, CAG as an institution has been thinking very seriously about it, because our constitutional mandate says that if something is to be valued for the purposes of government accounts, then perhaps we have to step in. And the form at which the accounts are to be maintained are also to be finalized in consultation with the CAG. In fact, we are already in discussion with similar institutions world over. We have an International Association of Supreme Auditing Institutions, and in that there is a working group on environment audit, and we have been in discussion with them. And in fact, the international experience which is there in the field, that what are the challenges, what should be the strategies, how the goals have to be determined, how to identify agencies and organizations, and what are the best practices which are being followed by world over, can always be shared so that we learn from the experiences of others. In fact, our initial assessment shows that countries like Australia, New Zealand, and some Scandinavian countries have done quite well in the preparation, and we can learn from their experience. In fact, we have a wing called GASAB, which has come up with a concept paper, and in this paper we have tried to find out the way forward, that what should be our short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals to be able to achieve the commitments made to UN. In fact, in the accounts wing, we have already started incorporating information relating to environment in a separate notes to accounts in the finance accounts from the year 2019-20 onwards. And in fact, the full account information should be available if everything goes right from next year onwards. So these are the things which we have in mind, because we feel that it is one of the important areas, and in fact accounting would be the first step for measuring the damage, and it will give leads to the reasons for those damage and would initiate policy action to remedy the damage already happened to the environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving all those details of the work that CAG is doing. It also highlights the importance that the government is paying on the proper maintenance of natural resources, also keeping a tab on the expenditure and revenues, whether they are due to it. As you have rightly pointed out, environmental accounts can help detect the areas of concern for direct remedial measures. Agriculture is the mainstay in India, and therefore any discussion on the use of environmental accounting and policy will be incomplete without some thoughts on how these link up with India's agricultural policies. We are extremely fortunate to have with us Ms. Chavi Jha, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, who is in charge of several important schemes under India's National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture. Ma'am, may we request you to kindly share your views and expectations with us so that the national statistical system can explore the possibilities to address your data needs. Over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. DDG must be and other dignitaries at the NCAVES forum. I'm extremely fortunate that you've given me this opportunity. As we already know, agriculture is by far India's biggest economic sector, and 2/3 of India's families derive their sustenance from agriculture. So naturally, this is a very important sector, but it's also a truism that, that we ignore nature at our peril. So while the Green Revolution has helped India to attain self-sufficiency in food, but now we find that there are several issues propping up with the quality of growth. And we find that our soil, water, things like chemical fertilizers, etc., are causing kind of long-term challenges with the sustainability of the sector. And unless we take these challenges head on and do something now, we are going to face massive problems in the future. As it is, agriculture in India is precarious because 60% of our land is rain-fed. So we really need to look into sustainable methods of agriculture. And it is with this in view that we have the National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture with a lot of components. And so the National Mission focuses on 10 key dimensions of agriculture, which are improved crop seeds, livestock and fish cultures, water use efficiency, pest management, improve farm practices, nutrient management, agricultural insurance, credit support, markets, access to information, and livelihood diversification. And 7 of these 10 dimensions are directly related to the environment. So we actually, as I said, to make our agriculture sustainable in the long run, we have to look at various areas to make it sustainable. Like we have to think of organic farming, we have to think of greater use of biofertilizers, use of precision irrigation, micro irrigation, etc. Techniques such as direct seeded rice, crop diversification, to move away from the wheat paddy cycle, which are water intensive, horticulture, etc. Then use of climate resilient varieties in agriculture. These are some of the have to seriously think of to make agriculture sustainable in the long run. Then, and how to measure all these changes that we want to bring about is, of course, extremely important. And this is where the system of environmental economic accounting provides a framework to understand these linkages between natural resources and agricultural productivity. Because unless we are able to measure this, we are not, as so many speakers have already pointed out, we would not be able to take sort of corrective measures. So MOSPI's efforts in initiating this compilation of environmental accounts is a very important step, and it will really help us to impute costs to every decision that we make in terms of what it means for the environment and what it means for economic growth. Because actually there are no free lunches, we have to understand that. The accounts related to they are maintaining, the MOSPI is doing a great job regarding maintaining accounts related to croplands, giving the Gini index of land concentration and effective number of crop species, which are all very revealing. And some of the data sets related to the schemes of the government, especially under the National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture, have helped in providing us, very useful inputs for compilation of environmental accounts. So we are looking at more and refined data for more holistic policy making, monitoring, and setting up of feedback mechanisms. So we wish MOSPI all success in refinement and better whatever maintenance of these accounts, which will really help us in our decision making. I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to express my views on such an important topic, and wish you success for this quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We are extremely thankful to all the 4 eminent speakers for the enthralling and enriching discussions. I'm sure all of us have gained a lot from this series of knowledge sharing. We now move on with our next session of the day. If we had to create a word cloud of the most discussed environmental issues, climate change is likely to be the most prominent one, with its effect now being felt by each and everyone across the world. To discuss the importance of statistics in assessing and monitoring climate change, we now have with us Mr. Vlad Truska, team leader from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, as it is most commonly referred to. We request you, Mr. Vlad, to please make your presentation. Over to you, Vlad.
Hello. I hope you can see me. Okay,
Yes.
good. Let me try to share my presentation. And I hope you will be able to see this.
Yeah, it is visible.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you so much. So, first of all, thank you for the organizers for the invitation to UNFCCC to speak at your event. I think it's really important the things that you are doing, and in the last 3-4 years we have intensified our cooperation with the UN Statistical Division in New York, and we have a lot of activities in common that I will present towards the end of my presentation. But again, there were several speakers that mentioned the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC. So I think it's important to start by showing you who we are and what we do and how we are linking the policy with the statistics and how the statistics is extremely needed in our process. So first of all, who we are. We are the UN Climate Change or UNFCCC, as was pointing out. We are a secretariat in Bonn, and we deal with the three major agreements: the Climate Convention, the Kyoto Protocol and its Doha Amendment, and lately with the Paris Agreement. So this is the main activity of the Secretariat. As you can see, we have different mandates in terms of negotiations, the intergovernmental process. We support parties with the trainings, capacity building, but we also do analysis of information and data. And part of our latest focus is related to the nationally determined contributions. A lot of people now talk about these NDCs that the parties have come up with. A lot of transparency reports in terms of like reporting, the review of these reports or analysis, and also the multilateral consideration. But we also receive a lot of adaptation communication and also information on finance, technology, and support that was provided. We also deal with the project-based mechanism, and CDM is the most well-known of it. Part of also what I wanted to express today, I know that we don't have a lot of time, but I think it's important when we speak about the Paris Agreement to have a big picture of it and how the objective to strengthen the global response to the climate crisis was laid out into the objectives in the agreement, but also in terms of the action on adaptation and mitigation, and also the means of implementation in terms of finance, technology, development, transfer, capacity building. At the same time, we talk about the accountability, we talk about the transparency of action and support, the global stocktake, which shows the ambition of the parties, but also the facilitation of the implementation and promoting compliance. So all in all, we speak about the Paris Agreement in all these characteristics of it. But what will be Paris Agreement without its work program? You could have probably heard about that in 2018. After 3 years of negotiations, the parties to the Paris Agreement adopted the work program in Katowice, and this was extremely important. And the Paris Agreement, without its work program, would have been a relevant agreement, but without the ways of implementing it. So what this Paris Agreement work program is actually a rule book how to implement the Paris Agreement. So there are a lot of decisions, a lot of provisions in these decisions which are the basis to implement the agreement consistently. So it is extremely important to browse to these decisions to see the balance between the topics in terms of the mitigation, adaptation, finance, transparency, means of implementation. All in all, they found this balance in the work program. There is also an extremely relevant provision in this set of decisions about the differentiation between countries. We know that countries are not starting at the same level, so there is a need of flexibility in terms of some of the provisions. Now, moving forward, because we talk about policy, I thought that I will just stop to two items that are probably more connected with the statistical world than the others, and these are transparency and adaptation. First of all, on transparency, we talk about this enhanced transparency framework, which is not something new, but it builds on the mutual trust and promotes the effective implementation of the provisions. So it also provides flexibility, as I have mentioned before, on the different capacities that parties have. And probably most important is this idea that it builds on the collective experience of the current measurement, reporting, and verification, which was mentioned earlier by one of the speakers, the fact that India presented its biennial update report to UNFCCC. All these reports that are done currently are the basis for the new enhanced transparency framework. Parties learned a lot in the last 10-15 years about reporting to UNFCCC, reporting their emissions, their data, reporting their policies, their adaptation measures, and so on. And this, all in all, is now going to be enhanced into this new transparency framework. This has two parts: the transparency of action and transparency of support. And also, it is important to view it as with the benefits that this transparency framework brings in terms of informing the policies, the plans and strategies, as it was mentioned by the speakers before me, the improved access to support, because donors are interested to put their funds into activities, but they need to know where these activities, where this money should go to. And it's important to see reports coming from the respective parties. It's also important for the capacity building and for the awareness of what the respective parties are doing. Also, just to see it in a graphical way, what is this enhanced transparency framework and what is the process? It is, as mentioned before, part of the reporting that needs to be done by the parties in terms of their GHG inventories, their progress with their NDC, the support provided and the one received, and also adaptation, of course. So this goes to a review process where the independent experts will be looking on the consistency of information, the consideration of progress, improvements, capacity building needs, and so on. And it will end with a multilateral consideration of this process with online question and answer, and also in-session presentations and live question and answer from other parties. This is a process that is not totally new, but now the big difference is that it applies now to all the parties in the world under the Paris Agreement. Now, moving to adaptation, because I know that part of the focus of your project is also on adaptation. I just wanted to share a bit the concepts under the Paris Agreement. Of course, the temperature goal, but also the important global goal on adaptation. in terms of enhancing the adaptive capacity, the resilience strengthen, the reduced of the vulnerability to climate change. So, and the way this adaptation process is linked with the disaster risk reduction, the Sendai framework, the sustainable development goals, and all this having in the center the idea of reducing vulnerability and enhancing resilience, especially in developing countries. So, also linked with the adaptation, just wanted for you to have a picture of where the main channels for information on adaptations are coming from. Parties have already started to do this even from the year 1999, when the national communication of developed countries started to be presented to the Secretariat, which was followed also in 2002 by the start of the national communications of developing countries. So this information, again, is not something new. What is probably new is now what is happening under the Paris Agreement. The two main vectors that are given the information on the adaptation aspects, which are the adaptation communication and the biennial transparency reports. And you can see in the boxes under these two new vectors all this information that is supposed to be provided by parties. You see, there is a lot of data, there is a lot of information that will be needed. Going further, the focus of today's presentation and the idea of the link between the two worlds, the policy and the statistics, is coming in the next 2-3 slides. So how is actually the policy linked with statistics? If we look at the process, and I just picked up the issue of emissions, of greenhouse gas emissions. Under the Paris agreements, the parties will need to establish and report on their entity that is responsible with the greenhouse gas emission inventory, but also on the preparation process and how there is a division of responsibilities by institutions to make sure that there is a clear picture on the activity data collection, the choice of methods based on the IPCC guidelines, and all the process related to uncertainties, emission factors, country-specific data, and so on. On top of this, the archiving of data for the entire time series from the beginning of the measuring time that is needed to be presented. So this is part of the process. Then if we look at the methodology, the countries are also expected to use the 2006 IPCC guidelines, which, as you know, this is based on the territory principle, and also the new versions for this IPCC guidelines. They will also need to account for the emissions in the main sectors like energy, industrial processes, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, waste, and others. But I think most important thing is that they will need to use official statistical information. They can also use different techniques that are provided by the IPCC to estimate missing values. But the important thing is that the official statistics are the core part of the work on the greenhouse gas emissions. And this is where the statistical offices have an important role in the process. Then I mentioned a bit earlier about the institutional arrangements. This is something that is extremely important because the countries will need to show and first of all establish and then report their formal or informal institutional, legal and procedural arrangements. You need to have this in place to make sure that every 2 years you are able to make sure that the inventory is calculated, the emissions are estimated, the inventory is put together, and it's submitted officially to the UNFCCC. So you have to make all these institutional, legal, and procedural arrangements. But you also need to show the roles and responsibilities of different agencies and institutions in preparing the inventory, including the most important, the designated agency. And of course, this is not something that can be easily replicated from one country to another. Of course, there are some models that function in different countries, but this actually should be based on the specificity of the national circumstances. Now, moving forward, I wanted also to show you a bit of how we are managing the data. We have a lot of applications. We are running, for example, the NDC registry. We have also an application for the NAMAs and for the different aspects of the reporting and review. But I just wanted to show you the greenhouse gas data interface. This is something that we are, again, running for and managing for some time. And this is the place where we have all the information that is submitted by the parties. Again, we are having this information as submitted by parties. So this is official information submitted by parties. This is not, there is no manipulation of data into this. They are just shown in a maybe a more user-friendly way. And you also have the link on the slide so that you can go on and take a look on it after this event. And again, we have there all the information, the official information submitted by parties in terms of their emissions, in terms of their detailed data. You can see different reports about the data submitted by parties. And again, this is something that we manage on a continuous basis, and we will continue to receive this information under the Paris Agreement when the time will come for these reports under the Paris Agreement. Then, just to conclude, I just wanted to, as I mentioned at the beginning, to have two slides at the end. First of all, on cooperation. We have a great cooperation with the statistical division, especially following the report on the climate change statistics that was presented to the 49th session of the Statistical Commission in 2018, where also based on this report and the activities that were mentioned, the Statistical Commission requested the Statistics Division in New York and the UNFCCC Secretariat to undertake all these joint initiatives in developing climate change statistics, to encourage joint capacity building efforts and trainings, and also to find ways in which the national statistical offices will be encouraged to be more involved in the preparation of the data submission that the parties are doing to the UNFCCC. Based on this, in the last 2-3 years, we have had a lot of activities with UNSD, different events, regional events, national events. We are participating in the expert group on environmental statistics, and especially in the last period, we worked together with UNSD in the process of preparing the global set of climate change statistics and indicators, which was mandated by the Statistical Commission. And this is an important part of the work on the climate change statistics that will come in the next years. In terms of some conclusions for the climate change policy and the links with the statistics, we see that the countries are submitting a large amount of data on their national activities, and we see this more and more, especially now when the preparation of the reports coming under the Paris Agreement. We will see this more and more. All these are publicly available on our website, so they are easy to browse to from every country in the world. As I mentioned earlier, also the data that is needed from the National Statistical Offices is rather complex. We talk about a lot of information, for example, on activities, on economical activities, for the countries to be able to prepare the greenhouse gas emission inventories. And this requires expertise and resources. And this is something that is very important. And we keep telling this in the meetings that we have with the institutions that report climate change. To understand the link between statistics and climate change data, and to make sure that there is a cooperation between the national statistical offices and the national authorities that are reporting climate change. This is an important part at the domestic level to make sure that these two institutions, or the ones that are involved in the statistics and the ones that are involved in the reporting on climate change, they cooperate very strong in terms of the data. And this is something that we keep telling when we have this kind of joint meetings with the UNSD or during the statistical commission. We have raised this many times, that it is important that not only at the international level to cooperate, but also at the domestic level. So with this, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak and present our activities in terms of the policy and statistics. And I wish you a great success with your project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vlad, for the wonderful discussion and making us aware about the different activities of UNFCCC. It's been really helpful. We do realize that our roles and responsibilities have actually grown to a much higher level with these conventions coming into place. And now we need to have a stronger cooperation with the environmental statistics people, the people who are actually doing the environmental data collection in order to report better. Thank you, Vlad. And during our first day in the forum, we heard our Director General, Dr. Shailja Sharma, actually speaking about collaborating better for improved reporting on the different environmental aspects. The corporate sector also have been doing a lot of work. They've been gearing up for being environment sensitive, and they too have a wealth of knowledge and information with them. The information with the private sector, and that coupled with the administrative data, becomes a huge repository for us to be used in the environmental reporting process. So going ahead with my next session, we have a detailed session from planning to execution in the corporate sector. Through this session, we would like to elaborate on the use of environment accounts for the economy, not just for the sustainability purpose, but also for resource efficiency and the strengths of the businesses to support MOSPI's efforts on environmental accounting. The subject majorly indicates the mainstreaming of sustainability in corporate business operations. Mr. Praveen Srivastava, ex-Chief Statistician of India, will be moderating this session, and the speakers for this session are Rita Roy Chaudhary from FICCI, Ms. Seema Arora from CII, and Dr. Ajay Mathur from TERI. Over to you, Praveen, sir.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to distinguished delegates. It's a pleasure to be back. Today we are going to have a session with 3 experts. In the first day, you must have, you remember there are 2 key messages that we took back. One was that the CF framework is a framework which is an agreed framework by all members, and people are adhering to that. The data needs are immense. And thirdly, India having a decentralized statistical system, the need for multiple levels of cooperation and coordination is underlying the entire efforts. So, as you are aware, India's GDP is such that the agriculture sector contributes to about 14 to 15% of the GDP. The manufacturing sector contributes around 30%, and somehow the workforce is slightly in a different way. Around 50% of our workforce is in the agriculture sector, and you've heard from some of the speakers that the dependence on agriculture in terms of the work and the family and the livelihood is immense, which brings focus to the need for sustainable agriculture. At the same time, there are debates in various other forums about work, live type of work, shifting to decent work and to green jobs. And this is why I want to bring in the notion that when you have to achieve the Agenda 2030, the CR framework plays a very critical role because a lot of the indicators are dependent on the environment and climate change. Today, we are going to take forward our interaction as part of the SDG as well as the CR framework by interacting with the industry and the academia. We have with us distinguished speakers from the Association of Industries, and that's since it is a framework, we would expect that the framework gets imbibed into the framework of these chambers of commerce and industry associations so that they can be furthered and improved upon by the industry directly. So the data challenges are immense, and without the industry getting involved, it will be very difficult for us to achieve any of the agenda that we have put forth to us. So MOSPI NSO India is playing a leading role, and we are proud to have led the SDG 2030 agenda as well as the CR framework. We are doing it in a modular approach. Now, as I said, the importance of industry is very crucial to the success of this the environment and climate change debate. There is an increasing recognition within the private sector of the importance of including the environment in business decision making. A prerequisite of this is the ability to incorporate environmental issues into business accounting and company reporting. There are a growing number of initiatives. A lot of industry are taking initiatives by themselves, and we would like to hear from them. The experience with the industry association is helping us in furthering this context. So similar developments are occurring within governments attempting to understand the value of the environment and engage the private sector to help in delivering policies and programs which are sustainable and safeguard the value of future developments. In order for the public and private sectors to join forces in decision making and reporting on the relationship between economy and environment, effort is needed for both communities to understand the needs and approaches of the others. Steps towards aligning public and private sector approaches have been made, but this alignment is still in a stage of infancy, and that's why we look forward to the cooperation and full collaboration from the Industry Association. The first speaker in this session is Mrs. Rita Rai Chaudhary, Assistant Secretary General of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, in charge of several domains, including those of environment and climate change. With over 25 years of experience, she has handled several projects with international partners and represents FICCI, which is the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, in several committees of the government instituted by its various ministries. She has chaired the working group on private sector role in future carbon market under the Paris Agreement constituted by the Ministry of Environment and Forests and Climate Change, the Government of India. I request her to present her views on the corporate sector stake and initiatives in protecting the natural capital. I think the title of the presentation is Concept of Natural Capital Amongst Businesses. So Mr. Rita Rai Chaudhary, if you are there, can you present your views? Do we have you on air? She's not in the meeting. So what we will do, we'll get back to her. And in the meanwhile, we'll go over to our second speaker, who is now the first speaker. We have Mrs. Seema Arora, Deputy Director General from the Confederation of Indian Industries, who has to her credited the CII ITC Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development, the CII Development Initiative, CII Foundation, India at 75, and Indian Women Network. So a lot of her work has been contributing towards sustainability in its direct and indirect form. Over the last 29 years, she has worked with industry, government, and community-based organizations to develop policy instruments, curate collaborative initiatives across sectors and stakeholders, and develop innovative voluntary approaches to sustainable development. We earlier listened, I pass on the floor to Mrs. Seema Arora, and I think the title of her presentation, The Benefits of an Improved Information System on the Status of Ecosystems and Natural Capital. Seema, are you online?
Yes, good evening, Chairman. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present CII and industry's viewpoint on this very important subject. I will just share my screen. I have a short presentation to take me through this, I would say to take the participants through our views. If it could kindly be confirmed that my screen is visible, please.
Yeah, it's visible. You need to put it in the presentation mode.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's okay now.
Yes.
It's okay.
So like you mentioned, Chairman, I would try to cover this topic of what are the various benefits of an improved information system on the status of ecosystems and natural capital. That is the focus of my presentation today. Of course, like you correctly mentioned, industry is now trying to mainstream, I would say, sustainability issues led by climate and other, ecosystem-based issues into their business decision making. I will also try to cover a few examples of how some of the work that CII has been doing has led to our members, incorporating these concerns into their decision making. So this is just a little illustration. This slide just gives an illustration on how business is actually both impacting as well as is completely dependent on the natural capital, and how the ecosystem and all the abiotic services actually, how their flows happen and how they create value both in terms of goods and services to society, as well as there are impacts, as we know, on the ecosystem and the natural capital. It's very important for us to understand that this particular sorry, are you able to hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. So it is important to understand that and we just want to set the tone by also putting out the context that we just went through this very difficult time period of a pandemic, and in fact there are such stark similarities between COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. Both are risk multipliers affecting the most vulnerable, and all these issues of climate, ecosystem actually have a huge economic fallback, which became very clear through the COVID pandemic. And there are some numbers that every one of us are aware of, and those are on the slide. The simple point through this slide is to say that if COVID-19 could create so much impact on the vulnerable community, on the economy, and climate itself, as we know, can be a much larger scale. Any event triggered by climate change can actually cause much larger scale damages. In fact, there is also evidence that nearly 30%, more than 30% emerging infection diseases happen because of land use change, agriculture expansion, and urbanization. So extreme, I would say, connect between the way we are, treating our ecosystems and therefore the impact that it creates on both lives and livelihoods. Also there, WHO has estimated that climate change can actually cause a lot of deaths, almost 250,000 additional deaths per year. So this is really a big issue that I think corporate India is now, through this pandemic, also learned that they need to be prepared for such events which can be triggered by climate and nature. Again, some numbers. Global numbers, the risk of nature loss, what is really, what is at stake, basically, what is at stake. And suffice to say, if we just took one figure, Cyclone Amphan in India was one of the most expensive cyclones in the region. And if we were to actually incorporate the, all such, costs into our, accounting, then we would really be able to understand that what is the kind of impact we are creating and what kind of losses we are actually, creating to both our ecosystems. And if we convert it into economic losses, it's huge. For example, between 1998 and 2017, India suffered economic losses to the tune of $80 billion only due to natural disasters. So these are huge, huge numbers. And Mumbai's frequent flooding from 2005 is resulting into an annual loss of $6 billion and is estimated to use $1 trillion annually by 2030. So these are some, figures that we need to be aware of, and we need to, therefore, as corporate India, we feel that companies are now beginning to understand that what is the kind of, I would say, risk that they face. In response, CII has actually created several alliances. CII, as you know, a large industry association with over 10,000 members, a footprint of almost 60 plus offices in the country. We have affiliated associations so that our indirect reach is very, very large. So we have created, and I'm only talking of 3 alliances here, which could be very specific to the discussion that we have today. One is called the India Business and Biodiversity Initiative, which is a business-led initiative. It was basically created at the behest of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change when India had the presidency of the Biodiversity Corp, CBD. It's a private sector-led initiative. The whole idea is to mainstream biodiversity, nature conservation, and ensure sustainable use of biodiversity. We also have, a Cleaner Air, Better Life platform, where we have an India CEO Forum for Clean Air, which is totally dedicated to contributing towards making the air quality in Indian cities better. We also have an Unplastic Collective, which is a platform that seeks to minimize externalities of plastics on environment, ecological and social health of our planet. So these are some of our platforms through which we work with businesses to help them understand how they can mainstream sustainability concerns, how they can do reporting, how they can first monitor, measure, and then also take action on some of these very important issues. I'm now going to take a few examples because in interest of time, I just want to maybe quickly take that how, mainstreaming of this, nature valuation is actually happening in industry. And most of the examples that I present are something that the India Business Biodiversity Initiative of CII has actually helped companies, understand and integrate. So this is just the first example is of Club Mahindra Madikeri Resort. And it was, really planned on 2 important principles. One, to minimize cutting of the native species of trees, and also the coffee plantation, and also meeting tourist expectations because tourists would want to have a much nicer green and clean environment at resorts. And what has, what they basically did was, during the construction, they took certain initiatives. 74% of the plot area was kept for only green cover. The resort was constructed in phases so that there was less impact on the, because of the construction to the native vegetation. And the apartments and any construction proposed on the site was adjusted so that, the cutting of the trees was minimized. What really happened was, what was the impact really was that the resort ambient temperature is much, much lower in comparison to nearby area. They don't need to install very huge air conditioning capacity. So they've had economic, gains in terms of saving that cost, and that has really helped. And plus the ambience and the experience for the guests is also really very helpful, very good, in fact. Just looking at another example quickly, this is a JSW Dharmatar Port Private Limited. Here again, essentially this was the benefits for them. The risks were very clear. It's a creek which has a moderate cover of mangroves, etc. So there was a risk that the loss of mangroves would happen. Risk to agriculture and factory premises was there due to saltwater flooding. So again, they basically undertook the construction and the plantation of different types of saplings, and they made sure that in the construction they're taking care of things which will not cause those risks to happen, and there's much reduced impact on their operations due to flooding. They also have been able to generate opportunities of livelihoods for the local communities. So these are just two examples. There are many more, and there are many more which need to be talked about. As CII, we bring out routinely publications which are there on our website, which can be referred to by the participants. They can be freely downloaded from the CII Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development website. I also want to talk about an example that we have been working on the agriculture side, because that itself, as we know, agriculture has the largest footprint on the ecosystem. And one of the things that most of the people who live in North India are familiar is that there is a practice of burning the paddy straw in the northwestern belt of India. And CII has actually been working with 200 villages, almost 20,000 farmers over the last 3 years, and avoided the burning to the extent that we have managed to save almost 1.3 kiloton of PM10 has been saved in 105 villages, and different options have been given to the farmer with lesser cost, or 10% lower cost. And that has led to 83% increase in adoption of sustainable agriculture practices. Here again, industry has actually provided the solutions. Industry has led the way by actually training the farmers. So industry is going beyond its premises, also beyond its own operations, to actually participate in large-scale national problems as well. And that is actually something that we are very proud of as our members. Finally, we heard about the importance of resource efficiency. As CII, data, we believe, and that was mentioned by the chair also, data and science is actually the most important part, and it's very important to create the right kind of data. And I'm very glad that the Ministry of Statistics Planning is actually, undertaking this event today and is focusing so much. CII has, done a few studies in the last 2 years. One has been on the looking at the resource efficiency of pulp and paper sectors, where basically we've done this resource flow. Material flow rather of the, what you see on the slide is a material flow diagram of the pulp and paper sector. And this report is also available on our website, where we really see that how the material is flowing across the processes in the pulp and paper sector, right from where it is coming, whether it is imported paper, whether it's produced in the, in the country from different raw materials. How is it actually flowing, and what are the opportunities for bringing in more efficiency in the way we are using the resources, the natural resources. And we also came up with recommendations for the government, with regard to how we need to control the import of waste paper. How do we actually create more symbiosis, industrial symbiosis between paper and cement sector? Specific suggestions were done. There were also recommendations for industry, that what they need to do in terms of, ensuring resource efficiency. Similarly, we have done a material flow analysis and resource efficiency study on the iron and steel sector and made recommendations. And we will continue to take different sectors of the Indian economy that are resource intensive to be able to then give this data-based, science-based, data-based evidence to the government, so that, and to the businesses, so that actions can be taken by both to improve the efficiency and reduce the footprint, because that would mean that we are reducing the nature loss. So these are some of the initiatives that CII as an organization has been taking, and we do see that there's a huge benefit of valuing nature, and we have been working with our members, trying to make them understand. We also feel that it's important to, number one, have sound data, sound science-based understanding, assessments in terms of understanding the true cost of the externalities is very important. So the full cost of the externalities and folding that into a business is very, very important. So we are for that, and we have tools which are actually helping companies to see how do they fully cost the use of water in a particular geography, or the pollution that they cause in a particular geography, whether it's water or air. The true cost is actually folded into their PL and P&L system, so that they can take the right decisions. And finally, very transparently report, because it's important that different stakeholders know that what are the true cost and how are the companies also trying to mitigate those costs and making sure that they are actually creating value. So creating natural capital rather than actually eroding natural capital is very important. So this is the framework that CI is actually using through its various platforms, alliances, and through the work that we have been doing in terms of database science-based studies as well. With this, I will just like to thank you all for this opportunity for me to be able to present to you, and I'd be happy to take any questions if there is any chance to do that. Thank you, sir, for your time and attention.
Thank you, Seema, for telling us about what CII is doing with the industry. And it gives me an idea which I can pose to the NSO India, that perhaps a joint team can be brought together between the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Industry, and Ministry of Corporate Affairs and NSO to see how we can come out with the environmentally sensitive profit loss account and a balance sheet. So this is something which, if it evolves from the industry association, the acceptability is better, and if it's voluntary, it's all the better. So this is something I like to pose, and maybe they can take it up along with CII. Now we are switching over to the academia. As I said, as part of the SDGs and the CF framework, involving all the stakeholders is important. We have with us today Dr. Ajay Mathur. He's the Director General of the Energy Resources Institute, New Delhi, who is also a member of the Indian Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change. He has been a leading climate change expert at the Energy Resource Institute. He has been promoting innovative ways for an improved environmental quality through nature-based solutions. He also co-chairs the Global Energy Transitions Commission. And we look forward to listening from Dr. Mathur on his views and the role he sees for natural capital accounting and driving a more resource-efficient economy. So over to you, Dr. Mathur.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I do understand that we are, competing with the clock, and I will therefore be far briefer than the detailed presentation that I have. Let me start by saying the sum total of issues. First of all, data and the collection of data is immensely important if we want to value and if we want to internalize natural resource accounting into our frameworks. That's number one. Now, it doesn't matter if you're the government or your private sector, whoever you are. The second is there is already a vast amount of data that is collected through various sources. But the third issue is that there is a institutional issue which relates to the fact that there are many laws under which data is collected, yet the data we want is often not collected. And I argue at the end that adding Gram Sabhas and enabling them to do work which they are supposed to do under current laws would make this possible. So if you've heard this, you've heard my entire presentation. Now, let me come to the details. Okay, there you go. So one of the key things is that we are talking about ecosystems which provide a variety of services to people. And there have been various ways in which they have been classified, but a particular cut is that you look at both the short-term and the longer-term values. You look at the provisional benefits they provide, the regulatory benefits they provide, and the cultural benefits that they provide. This is a useful way of looking at the various kinds of information that people value, and hence provide a input into what are the kinds of information that we need in order to capture these. If you want nutrient recycling, well, the first thing you must do is have information about where are nutrients, what is the value, and therefore the soil card program becomes a primary tool in gathering data on this. If you are looking at provisioning services, these are things where we already provide goods. This is the area where the largest amount of data is needed because it is connected to the monetary system of accounts. However, if you're looking at the regulatory services, there is very little data, and the data is very, very specific. So in air quality regulation, for example, we have data on the air quality in Delhi. We have data on emissions that occur, for example, from the burning of paddy straw in Punjab. What we don't have is data on how the gases that are produced in the combustion of that biomass waste are converted into particles. Technically, the term for it is they become secondary particles, and therefore they go up as gases in Punjab and land in Delhi as particles. But how that will work, what is the kind of information, we don't have. So what I would argue is that the range of information is vast. We have detailed information in certain places. We have very little information in other places. However, and again, I would like to stress the fact that because of the huge connectivity, and we have tried to capture this through the color and the width of the arrows that are there, what you see is that provisioning services and the basic materials of life is where the largest amount of importance for human well-being is. At the very least, we need to be able to capture this information. So how do you go about figuring out the economic value of these economic services? Now, in the recent past, my organization, TERI, has focused on developing the economic services provided by, say, I'll give you two examples, the Delhi Zoo. You look at, obviously, the aesthetic value. How do you look at the aesthetic value? How many people come there? What is the kind of expense that they incur in coming there? There is the issue of the biological diversity that is preserved there. Then there is the issue of the, this is in the form of animals, but there is also the natural biodiversity that has grown over a period of time. So you put all of these together and we look at the value. A much more complex example is a recently completed study that we did for the area around the Statue of Unity in Gujarat. Now, there are 4 places. There is a forest, there is a butterfly park, there is the Statue of Unity itself, and there are resorts. So there are tourists who come there. Now we can figure out how much these tourists spend. The challenge is, if they didn't spend in coming here, they would have spent in going somewhere else. We yet don't know how to compute that. Then there is this issue of, okay, if these tourists come, they must also be creating some kinds of problems. They must be creating waste. How do you take care of that waste? Again, these are issues which are, in a sense, still being developed. capturing the value of the forest itself and the biological diversity, there are good international methodologies through which you can do it as long as you have the data coming in. Now, one of the main drivers till now has been what is it that are the drivers for degradation, because this is the flip side of it. If you don't have data, you obviously cannot capture degradation as well. Now, what we do have is the data regarding land use and the data regarding floods and fires. So today what we say is that 60% of degradation in the economic services of ecosystems is due to floods, fires, and it should also be land degradation. These are the main reasons. Yes, population density is a reason, but have we captured the biological diversity? Have we captured the kinds of carbon pool reductions? I would think that if you add those, the amount of degradation that is captured would change considerably. Unfortunately, we don't have those numbers. It is very difficult to do it. Even at an all India level, it's just possible to do it at a very local level. So for example, if you look at the Corbett National Park, you can figure out what the degradation is. As I mentioned earlier, one of the advantages, but also problems, is that there are multiple instruments that work in all of these areas. I'm not going to read through them, but just tell you that each of these has a goal, each of these has an institutional mechanism, and each of these has a reporting mechanism for data. The problem is the lack of a place where we can put all of this together. So I am going to focus on what from the top is the 6th point, National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. Under this plan, various Gram Sabhas are supposed to make what are known as biodiversity registers. And the national government and the state governments are to enable the Gram Sabhas, build up the capacity so that they're able to do these biodiversity registers. There is some amount of resource flow that has occurred, but there's no state which can say that they've got biodiversity registers for all the Gram Sabhas. But we have started seeing these registers evolve in some Gram Sabhas. We've also started seeing them evolve in some districts. But I would look at this as the central pillar around which we look at building a barometer for the health of our ecosystem. So I'd just like you to remember this. This isn't something that you may want to go into as you go ahead and look at natural resource accounting. I think it's also important to note that there are multiple legal instruments at the level of acts of parliament which are there for the prevention of loss of biodiversity in general and for protection of both economic services from environmental services as well as specifically for forestry and biodiversity. I think the main issue here is the multiplicity of agencies that are involved. And sometimes the conflict that occurs. For example, if you look at the Forest Act and its protection clauses, the Biodiversity Act and the Forest Conservation Act on the one hand, and then you look at the Scheduled Tribes and Traditional Forest Dwellers and the Recognition of Forest Rights Act, there are very different agencies which are responsible for doing it. There is the one panchayats in the case of the traditional forest dwellers, and there's the forest department in the case of the Forest Act. I think if we want useful data and action, it is also important to get a degree of convergence on the implementation of these, which actually apply on the same kind of biodiversity that we are looking at. Now, key issue is that we have the Ministry of Environment and Forests. We have the MOPR and MOTA and the National Biodiversity Authority. These are different agencies, but there is no overarching landscape level authority where all of these things come together. And that's again one of the messages that I'd like to leave you with. The second message that I'd like you to leave you with is that by far and large, there are 4 key parameters that we need to capture. One is the 5 pools of carbon stock. This is the amount of tree that is above the ground, extremely well documented for forests across the country. This has been the mainstay of the forest departments, the working plans that they do. They've also started looking at the stock of carbon in the soil. That's also now reported. So you also have. But there is also the stock in grasslands. There's also the stock in wetlands, which are in a sense poorly understood. We tried to bring all of this together earlier in the or late last year, and found again that there was a problem in going all the way from a, just if you keep on adding disaggregated, you should be able to get the national total. That was a bit of a problem. So again, I think disaggregating this data is important. On biodiversity, richness and density, this, I think the most important thing is the biodiversity registers that I talked about, which therefore capture both the richness and the density, and could be then used to both monitor and assess biodiversity presence and biodiversity conservation in different areas. So again, you note that in some cases you have the data, in some cases you don't. And therefore, the key issue is that the coverage of data needs to be. Recharging of water resources, we have now, at least as far as the major river basins is concerned, this data is there. But when you look at watershed to water basin, there is a problem of, let me say, missing water. At the level of the watershed, if all the water adds up to be 100, at the river basin level, it comes out to be something of the order of about 70 or so. This is not to say that the water has disappeared, it's just that it is not captured in our sources. It is also possible that much of this could be water which is lost through floods, but even floods, at least the major floods, are captured in the water monitoring systems. But again, the point is that we have a basis on which enhance the quality of data that. And finally, the air quality and water quality. An increasing number of air and water quality sites and continuous monitoring systems are in the process of implementation. If you come to the Ministry of Environment and Forests in Delhi, you will see that the continuous reporting on a number of sites is available on the screens that are there. The issue here is, yes, it is good. Continuous monitoring should be made available, and the continuous monitoring is also used to provide the notices and challans to the people who cross the system, who are non-compliant. So this is different from a non-compliance point of view. If you have it in the middle of a city, for example, and the SAFAR system reports it for 27 monitoring stations in Delhi, and if there are excursions, and there are excursions most of the time, well, not most of the time, I should correct myself, when there are excursions, there are large excursions, especially at this time of the year, who is to be penalized? So we don't have a connection between the data that is available and the people who are emitting it. So that is another issue that I would like to highlight. This is the heart of what balance of my presentation is about enabling Gram Sabhas. I will go through it very fast and can have a longer discussion with all who are interested. So the central point that I'm making is that the Gram Sabhas where the biodiversity registers are to be met is the place where we have the weakest data system right now. And the need for capacity building of those Gram Sabhas is extremely important. This has been captured, as I said, under various acts. And I think the important issue is one, to enable them to capture it. And number two, the last point, which is that market linkages for these Gram Sabhas are important. We have seen examples now, for example, in Himachal Pradesh, where the products that are produced, so the state agencies help the Gram Sabhas in producing soaps, in producing honey, in producing various kinds of food products, which were then sold to the, through various marketing linkages. And the part of the money went back to the Gram Sabhas. Now, this obviously provides money, but also provides the incentive for data recording and collection to be carried out. It also, therefore, provides the challenge of the biggest challenge that we have is unsustainable harvesting, and this biodiversity benefits flowing ultimately to the Gram Sabhas would also provide us with a very strong feedback mechanism for stopping the unsustainable harvesting, as communities realize that unsustainable harvesting means that their own resources would reduce in the longer term. I want to thank you for your attention. I look forward to discussion as and when we have it today, or if you want to write me later. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur, and for giving us all these inputs, vital inputs on how the system needs to respond to the data requirements for the CR framework. We are actually running out of time, so we'll not be having question and answers, and I will not be able to go for a repeat round for the distinguished speakers. But I want to thank and also highlighting the need for data. On a lighter note, I would just like to state that, you know, if you had complete set of data, then it's a researcher's paradise, but a nightmarish challenge for the statisticians. And which is why we have this framework in hand, and we have adopted a modular approach so that we could collect data as and when we can. And the other issue is that data is always resource intensive, both in physical and human capital terms. And even though people take it as free, but then there's a huge amount of strengthening of institutions and systems that is required. We must also keep in mind and bear in mind something loosely what we know in statistics as the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where the more accurately you want to measure something, the probability of its accurate measurement goes to zero. So striking that balance, and I want to like to thank everyone for their useful inputs. We look forward to more interaction in the future and maybe formalizing this arrangement in the discussion that we take forward for the CR framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers for the wonderful and enriching discussions. In these unprecedented times when the entire globe has realized the potential of nature and the associated climate change, joining hands with the private parties, integrating their knowledge and wisdom towards achieving sustainability has become the need of the hour. We now move ahead with our session for the day. Ultimately, all our efforts towards valuation of nature and its services has the single aim to improve the health of our earth. We are immensely grateful to Ms. Inger Anderson, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director UNEP, for agreeing to address the August gathering. With over 30 years of experience in international development, economics, environmental sustainability, strategy, and operations, Ms. Anderson has led work on a wide range of issues, including agriculture, environmental management, biodiversity conservation, climate change, infrastructure, energy transport, and water resource management and hydro diplomacy. We are honored to hear from Ms. Anderson to talk about linking environment to a healthy planet. Ms. Anderson would be joining us now.
Thank you for inviting me to address the Natural Capital Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services India Forum 2021. My appreciation to the National Statistical Office and the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation in the Government of India for the important strides made in the development of natural capital accounting at national and regional levels. India's leadership in advancing this agenda globally is vital to protecting the very foundation of economic growth, which is natural capital. I'd like to recognize the support of the European Union in funding the Natural Capital Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services project. Through this initiative, UNEP and partners have advanced natural capital accounting globally, and particularly in countries like Brazil, India, Mexico, China, and South Africa. Our efforts are aimed at bringing the world closer towards a consistent framework for ecosystem accounting, and I look forward to a UN statistical standard for ecosystems accounting in 2021. We at UNEP see three planetary crises facing humanity: the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and the pollution crisis. Fueled by decades of unsustainable consumption and production, these crises are destroying the natural systems upon which our economies and societies are built. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it is just how much we are exposed to risk that we are not even aware of or have begun to quantify or understand. It also offers us the opportunity to reimagine our relationship with the natural world, to shift our economic lens beyond crude measures that prize economic growth at any cost and develop measures that capture what we truly value: nature, health, well-being, equality. Adopting this lens can help propel us to a green recovery post the pandemic. Natural capital accounting, and in particular, the system of environmental economic accounting as the internationally agreed statistical framework, provides a harmonized measurement framework for organizing and presenting statistics on the environment and its relationship with the economy. And as we seek to finalize an ambitious and meaningful post-2020 global biodiversity framework agenda, it is crucial that it be factored into monitoring frameworks for the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. For far too long have we grown at the expense of nature, treating it as a resource with no limits. 2020 was a year that nature sent us a message, reminding us through pandemics, droughts, wildfires, hurricanes, melting glaciers, and rising temperatures that we can no longer afford its invoices. Invoices it is sending us due to our own carelessness. As the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has pointed out, making peace with nature is a defining task of the 21st century. Natural capital accounting has an important role to play in recalibrating our relationships with nature. I thank you for your leadership and look forward to hearing about your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Inga, for the wonderful thought we would keep in mind as the National Statistical Office. And also we would be looking forward to collaborating better for reporting better. Thank you. The efforts of the Ministry of Statistics and program implementation could not have been taken in the right direction and shape without the help and support from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Today, we have the honor and privilege to have with us Honorable Union Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Information and Broadcasting and Heavy Industries and Public Enterprises as well, Shri Prakash Javadekar, who will be sharing with us the vision for future of environmental governance in India. During his long career, he has held several important portfolios and has led the country towards creating an awareness about environment protection. It is indeed our great pleasure to get guidance from such a visionary. We shall now be listening to Honorable Minister, please.
I am very happy to be with NCAVES India Forum, which has organized a day-long deliberations on vision for future of environmental governance. This is topic very dear to my heart because not only I am Minister of the department, but because I have passion for environment. And I always say that we want to achieve both environment protection and development. There you cannot say that no development and only conservation, and also you cannot say that only development and no conservation. So there has to be a midway, and there has to be, and I am very sure that we can achieve both development and conservation together simultaneously. I'll narrate. Basically, let us understand the feature of India. India is a country where nature is worshipped, animals are worshipped, trees are worshipped. In every village, there used to be a village forest on the top of the hill or near the village, and there was age-old tradition. There won't be grazing, there won't be cutting of trees, it will just be growing and not reducing. That is called God's own forest. That is Indian tradition. India is in sync with nature. We regard human being as part of the whole nature's arrangement. And it is not, nature is not for exploitation of human needs. It is the coexistence which we believe in. And therefore, today what we are witnessing is, despite 16% of world's population and 16% of cattle population, which both require land, water and feed, and we have only 2.5% of the world's land mass. We have only 4% of rainwater resources. Still, our tree cover gets increased. In last 6 years, 15,000 square kilometers tree cover has increased in forest and outside forest also. So this is India. It doesn't happen everywhere. We have seen in some countries, I read because of scarcity of water, they have killed thousands of kangaroos and thousands of camels. This is not Indian culture. We have never done this despite our handicaps, despite our physical constraints. We have retained both, and our population has grown by 4-fold in last 70 years after independence. But still, we have done the best of conservation because our culture is conservationist. Our culture and ethos, the religious preaching, the spirituality all tells oneness of nature and human being. And therefore, when we consider some concepts like natural accounting of natural capital accounting, we must think, because it is different to different countries. There are countries which are very scarce of forest, where development has already taken place. Account for natural losses on building metro network. There are trees already planted by metro network, or they pay the government and government plants it, and they have grown. So if 50,000 trees are cut, nearly 5 lakh trees have grown. If you are calculating the nature capital and giving minus marks for tree cutting, then you have to give plus marks for tree planting and growth also. And it's not only about trees. 5 million passengers today are traveling in an environmental friendly mode, a public transport, thereby reducing at least 500,000 vehicles on the road. Is it not a pro-environment activity? That also needs to be calculated. So in a natural capital accounting, if you want to calculate the whole impact of metro network, it can't be lopsided. It has to take, in a holistic manner, we must look to the natural capital as what has happened to it. If there are some losses, there are many gains, and there are much more gains because of development. Many people tell me, oh, in COVID period, in lockdown, Delhi was much cleaner. It will remain. If you close down industries, if you stop the traffic, there is bound to be improvement in pollution scenario. But do you want to go to Stone Age? Then you will have to, the people will definitely move out of Delhi if there is no employment. It's an issue of livelihood also. So we cannot think only from the perspective of natural assets and liabilities context. It is much a deeper concept, and we must develop a deeper concept than this. We must add Indian story to it. We have taken up ambitious targets as our nationally determined contributions in Paris Agreement. Though we are not responsible for the climate change that has taken place in the world, it is because of the carbon emissions for last 100 years throughout the world that is affecting and that has brought climate change to the world. Right from Industrial Revolution, the European continent and American continent thereafter, and now China for last 70 years, are emitting. Our current historical contribution is just 3%, and our current contribution is just 6 to 7%. So we are not polluting, we are not emitting carbon GHG gases. We are actually serving the world by having a very ambitious, largest renewable program of the world. Prime Minister first declared 100 gigawatts of renewable energy. Then he declared 175 gigawatts, 100 gigawatts of solar energy, 175 gigawatts of renewable energy, and thereafter he enhanced it to 450 gigawatts of renewable energy. And in Paris Agreement we have made a commitment on our own that we will have 40% of the energy capacity mix of renewables. So this is India walking the talk. We are probably one of the major country, only one G20 country, only one G20 country which is following on our indices, and we are on the before the 2020 and the Paris Agreement becomes operational from 2021, we are already there. Our emission intensity has reduced by 21%, and we have targeted for 30% by 2030. We will overachieve. Our industries also planned carbon neutrality or having more renewable energy, having more greenery. They have planned it all way, on their own, without government help, without government pressure, because this is essential sensibility of the Indians. And therefore we are building natural resources. Simultaneously our population is growing, our natural resources are growing, our development is also happening. And this is the best confluence of both development and conservation. We have taken many steps. Today we have more than 90 gigawatts of renewable energy, in which we have said that nearly 30 gigawatt is solar energy, and there are more to come. Many are in pipelines. In Delhi also, now we are building not only the world's best metros. Modi government has doubled the speed of creating public transport through metros in 15 cities. 1,000 kilometers will be built in next 4 years. And already in last 6 years, more than 1,000 kilometers have been built. This is New India. We are improving the roads. We are also growing our forest stock. So, and we have also taken land degradation target of 26 million hectares in 10 years. This is huge. So India is not only walking the talk, taking ambitious goals despite its constraints. I think natural capital accounting, the experts can say whether it takes account of all these activities or not. If you look only to the losses to the natural capital and calculate it, and present is that so many billion rupees loss has taken place in the country because of natural capital losses, then it will be wrong. You must take into account the overall development, the human quality, because Indian people also have a right to good life. They cannot be condemned to the pre-development age life. Our electricity consumption is just 1100 kilowatts per hour per year. America is 11,000 kilowatts. America uses 600 cars per 1,000 population. Europe uses 400 cars. China uses 300 cars. India uses 25. So who is telling us about the natural capital resources? We are already in the conservation mode, some because of our circumstances, some because of our foreign rule which prevented us from going ahead with the industrial revolution. If there would not have been British government, we would have already a developed country. We were 36% of the export pre-British period. But now we are reduced to 1% just because we were not allowed to take sustainable development path in the growth and conservation. So my short point is that we must strive for sustainable development, thereby meaning conservation and development both together, not exclusive of each other. That is what I want to say on this occasion. I am very sure that your deliberation throughout the day will take and give many more suggestions. I will like to receive these deliberations, and we can work together on this comprehensive view and holistic approach. Thank you and all the best.
Prosperity is built upon three pillars: economy, society, and the environment, or in a more localized form, profit, people, and the planet. How do we balance the three is what we need to discuss on. So the second speaker that we have is Dr. Elliot Harris, who is the Assistant Secretary General and the Chief Economist of the United Nations, with an extensive experience in the design of macroeconomic policies and its application as a central instrument for reduction of poverty and for resilient and sustained economic development. I'm sure that the speakers that we have before us will throw a lot of light on the journey forward. So over to you, Dr. Marima.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Ministry for the invitation to engage with statisticians and others in this event. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed it is my honor to address this first forum on national capital accounting and valuation of ecosystem services in India. I would like to particularly congratulate the leadership taken by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, as well as the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change for recognizing the need to come together to better monitor and track biodiversity and for collaborating towards hosting this event. This is an excellent example for others to follow, one that could be replicated also in countries across the globe, as it demonstrates how much we can accomplish through working together across the environmental and statistical community. Biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse are one of the greatest challenges of our time. According to the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBS, approximately 1 million species have been estimated to face extinction unless we turn things around. This will not only be easy. Climate change is making it even more difficult to protect and sustainably use biodiversity, so we must raise our game and respond accordingly. The present biodiversity crisis threatens ecosystem services that we all depend on, such as provisioning of clean air, clean water, and food security. Moreover, COVID-19 pandemic has served as to highlight just how much health and biodiversity are interrelated. The Convention on Biological Diversity, being a global multilateral environmental agreement, aims to conserve and protect biodiversity and ensure the sustainable use of biodiversity and promote fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources. Currently, the convention parties, in collaboration with stakeholders, have embarked on developing a robust and ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework with the goal of building a resilient and sustainable future for all people. But to turn the tide on biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, we need to agree on how to get there. Currently, the Convention's 2050 vision for living in harmony with nature captures 4 main goals. 1, improving the connectivity and integrity of natural ecosystems, supporting health and resilience populations of all species while reducing the number of species that are threatened and maintaining genetic diversity. 2, valuing, maintaining, and enhancing nature's contribution to people through conservation and sustainable use, supporting the global development agenda for the people, for the benefit of all people. 3, ensuring that the benefits from the utilization of genetic resources are shared fairly and equitably. And 4thly, promoting means of implementation for achieving the global biodiversity framework. These goals clearly represent where we want to be. However, without being able to track progress, and identify gaps, we will not reach the goals we want to achieve. The Global Biodiversity Framework will include a formal monitoring framework as a foundation for tracking progress. A draft monitoring framework for the 2050 goals and 2030 targets has been developed and will be discussed at the next meeting of our subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice. A draft is publicly available also at our convention's website. The progress made towards developing this monitoring framework represents a global realization that governments, private sector, NGOs, donors, and international community need better, faster information to be able to identify trends regarding the state of biodiversity and ecosystems. This includes the ability to be able to measure the nexus between nature and socioeconomic development, monitor threats, track the impact of interventions, and target investments and policies. If we are to succeed in finding a way to live in harmony with nature, we, as the global community, need to be able to identify threats to biodiversity in real time. We need data which can be used to develop policies at national level and target interventions at global level to ensure that efficient, effective action is taken at the right place and at the right time. Natural capital accounting underpins many aspects of biodiversity monitoring. This monitoring framework provides us with a basis for tracking ecosystem extent and condition, for measuring investment in biodiversity and ecosystems, for identifying value ecosystem services, and for better understanding the linkages between drivers, pressures, states, impacts, and responses. But to roll out this framework and to make it practical, applicable for national and at global level use, we require increased collaboration between environmental specialists, biodiversity experts, statisticians, and decision makers, to mention but some. I believe today's meeting represents a step in the right direction for India. And as India is in the second most populous country and the 7th largest country by land area, this not only represents a huge step for India, but for a large proportion of the total population and land for our planet. I look forward to seeing the work of the natural capital accounting in India continue as it has begun really well, and I'm sure the world can learn from that experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth, for this insightful inputs on the global biodiversity framework and the importance of biodiversity in the arena of the CF framework. We also expect that the participants will look at the draft monitoring framework and give their inputs to the framework so that it becomes a useful tool for monitoring. We now hand over the platform to Dr. Elliot Harris. Elliot, are you online?
I am indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Elizabeth. We haven't seen each other for so long. It's a great pleasure to be here, to have been invited to participate. Thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor for me to be invited to participate in the NCAVES India Forum for 2021. And I'd like to start off by taking the opportunity, as Elizabeth has just done, to applaud the progress that's been made by India in implementation of the system of environmental and economic accounts and its contribution to the work of advancing the methodologies that we need for natural capital accounting at the international level. As you know, the SEEA was recognized by the UN Statistical Commission as a useful framework also for measuring the Sustainable Development Goals related to the environment and economy nexus. The mapping that was undertaken by the NCAVES project of the Indian National SD indicators with SIA found that 39 of those indicators are fully aligned with the SIA. And this, in my view, is an important reaffirmation of the importance of the SIA itself. I'm very encouraged to see also the reception of the accounts in India, with over 1,000 attendees in the first session of this forum. The release of these accounts and the start of the compilation of this year in India could not have come at a more opportune time.
Sorry, Elliot, can I please interfere for a second? Elliot, I think your camera is switched off. Can you please see?
We can only hear you, we can't see you.
Yeah, can you please see if it can be switched on?
Is that better?
Not as of now.
The indicator on my panel shows that the camera is on, and my camera has a light on it that shows that it's working.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what. Let me try one more to turn it off and turn it back on.
Yeah, please do that. Maybe it'll be more clear. But we are able to hear you though, loud and clear.
No, that's off now. Can you see me now? Still no?
No, actually.
Oh dear.
Not really. Well, I
But
think
my
we'll have to go ahead with your voice then.
Yes.
Okay, and then I'll try to see if I can fiddle with it in the meanwhile. What I was saying is that the start of the compilation of this year in India is extremely opportune, because we need this kind of an integrated information system in order to address some of the big challenges that we're facing today. And I'd like to point to just 3 of them. The one, of course, is COVID-19. As Inge Anderson pointed out in her intervention, we see an alarming spread of zoonotic diseases throughout the world as a direct consequence of economic growth that's being done not in harmony with nature. We know that 75% of the new and emerging infectious diseases among humans are zoonotic in origin. People are going to continue to expand into natural spaces, largely as a result of the pressure to expand agriculture. And as this continues, if it's not properly regulated, properly managed, we're going to see more of this kind of damaging virus emerging unless we change our policies. There's no real need to underscore the critical importance of the climate agenda. Climate change has affected all aspects of our lives. This last decade has been the hottest in human history. We've seen fires and floods, hurricanes, cyclones, droughts. All of them are becoming much more commonplace and much more intense. The disasters alone last year cost the global economy $150 billion in damages, and that's without counting the costs to human life. We've had people who've been killed by these disasters. We've had their livelihoods disrupted. People have been displaced. The costs are multiple of that figure of the economic losses. And Elizabeth just very eloquently described the biodiversity crisis that we're confronted with. And we know that we are accelerating the decline of biodiversity in large part because we have not been able to measure the amount of damage that's being done. And secondly, because we do not have a consistent approach to managing the use of our land or to making sure that we protect the species that are being threatened by extinction. It is in fact true. The global economy has grown by a factor of 4 over the last 50 years, and people now have attained a level of prosperity that it was unimaginable 60 years ago. But it has grown at a tremendous cost, and it's grown in a very unequal way. And that's, I think, what has inspired the Secretary General in his State of the Planet speech to say that making peace with nature is the defining task of the 21st century, and it's on all these fronts and many more as well. I would look at this from a range of different angles, but when we look at it from the perspective of economics, of the economic dimension, the answer is clear. We are in the situation we're in today because we do not internalize the external costs of what we do, of our economic activities. Part of that is because traditional information systems are siloed. We don't have the integrated information systems that would allow us to understand what the consequences in other areas are of our actions in any given area. We don't have to take these things into account as we make decisions, in large part because we're not making the right kinds of measurements. And this underscores the critical importance of sensitizing policymakers, decision makers everywhere, to the need to move beyond GDP. Don't get me wrong, as the economist, I'm a great fan of GDP. It's a truly magnificent indicator, the amount of information that it compiles in one single number that is understood universally. But it is one number in one dimension. It gives no information at all about quality or about what it costs to get to that level of economic output. It gives no information about the interlinkages that are important, and it says nothing at all about the future prospects for growth and prosperity. And that is the key point. We can no longer look only at GDP and expect to be able to manage our affairs in anything like a sustainable way. We have to look at the capital stocks that are underpinning our prosperity. The physical capital that we produce, the human capital, our people, ourselves, but of course the natural capital. The minister spoke about that quite eloquently a little while ago. And it is a combination of these three types of capital that represent the basis for future prosperity. And that's a particularly important question for developing countries, which tend to have a very high dependence on natural capital. All three are important. And unless we keep all three in mind as we make our decisions, we will find ourselves losing our way. And that, I think, is one of the most important roles that the system of environmental and economic accounting can help us, the ecosystem accounting can help us to do, which is to internalize these externalities. When we start to understand what is at stake, what values are at play here, and how we're losing them or not managing them well, when we start to measure them correctly, then we will be able to break the cycle of pursuing economic growth at any cost, simply because we are unaware of the cost. Now, these accounts are very timely. We intend to bring the whole system to the UN Statistical Commission in March of this year. And that's really important also for our efforts to speed up our trajectory towards the SDGs, because it's clear that maintaining natural capital is essential for the Sustainable Development Agenda. And we've heard that from the many interventions that have preceded us. And we also need, and this is critically important, the integrated information management system if we're going to manage effectively for sustainable development. We know that 2021 is supposed to be the special year to address the planetary emergency, the planetary crisis that we face. India, you've made a great step forward in the right direction with the implementation of this.
We lost. Elliot, can you just check your mic, because I think we've lost you.
Elliot, can you hear us?
No, it's... Elliot, I think we've lost you somewhere in between. It's blank.
Shruti, what is the status? Is Elliot online?
Ma'am, Mr. Elliot has just dropped. Elliot has just dropped out. He's trying to log in again. I'll just try to get him back.
Kulis, can you please switch off your mics? We're trying to get Dr. Elliot back online.
I'm back now. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're back. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
I'm so sorry about that. Not sure what happened. I got cut off there. No, I had pretty much finished my intervention. I'm saying that I think the step taken by India to carry this agenda forward is an inspirational one. And I hope other countries will follow your lead in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elliot. Sorry we lost you in between, but highlighting the importance of the internalizing the externality impact. I think we have all faced it last year in the with the global pandemic. Everyone has realized that we will now have to awaken ourselves to a new normal. And I think the world economy is rebooting. So this is an opportune time for us to think about the environmental impacts and aspects that needs to be addressed, to not only look at the CEA framework, but on how we should become more environmentally sustainable. So thank you so much, Elliot and Dr. Elizabeth. We were happy to have you. I'm sorry we have run out of time, so we will not be having any question answers. But thanks a lot for all your inputs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers for the wonderful discussions. I'm sure all of us have learned a lot through these rich deliberations. Now, before we proceed towards the closure for the day, there is an announcement to be made by Dr. Shailja Sharma, Director General Statistics, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Ma'am.
आ रही है या of our today's session and also 2 days of the NCAVES forum. And in these 2 days, in those very rich discussions, we have been hearing from all the participants, speakers, and panelists about the importance of natural capital accounting and the data needs for those. Of course, there was a lot of emphasis on how can we really reach where we are wanting to. And essentially, it is not something that we just start and we have everything in mind and then we just achieve it. It requires a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, a lot of inclusiveness of data. And I would like to say that India joined the NCAVES forum and we were really able to kind of make significant dents in our environmental accounting also. As the Honorable Minister was also saying that, yeah, when we are going in for our environmental accounting, we have to be more inclusive. We will have to consider all the ecosystems. And so it is to say as such that the scope of the environmental accounting is enormous. It's pretty wide. And all the NSOs and NSO India in particular will have to move ahead to expanding its scope and coverage so that we can really have a complete set of accounts. And recognizing this enormous data requirement for preparing a complete suite of environmental accounts, India had proposed a modular approach to prepare these accounts, and we really followed it up also. We pursued them. And we agree that, but we also agree that to reach and to have a complete set of accounts, we do need a very well-planned strategy, and that will enable NSO to achieve the required outcomes. So in the first session, I remember very well that our very esteemed panelists who are into this in the subject, Stephen, Director UNSD, Susan Gardner from UNEP, and Karine Kemper from Director World Bank, had suggested that an explicit documentation of the strategy will help MOSPI implement concerned efforts towards goal of strengthening the environmental statistics and the environmental accounts for India. And our most motivated team in the National Statistics Office, like, it's really creditable that it's just a week. We had been thinking on that, but kind of concretizing the whole thing and taking a decision after elaborate discussions it is really, I must compliment my team that they could take that decision, and the division explored the possibility of drafting a strategy based on the strategies of other countries. They saw the strategies of other countries and looked into them, and we hope that the strategy will help in detail the future scope of coverage related to the environmental accounts being targeted by NSO in the next couple of years, and also highlighting the long-term and the short-term activities set for the purpose. Once we have this strategy, we can ensure that, yeah, we will be on the right path of finalizing our national capital accounting. So today I announce that we would soon be releasing India's strategy for the environmental economic accounting. We would be drafting the strategy, and for that we'll be needing some time because consultations will be needed with all the stakeholders, partners, the members of the interministerial group. We have discussed in the first session on the first day that, yeah, we do have an interministerial group for the purpose because there are many stakeholders once we are talking of the environmental accounts. We will be also collaborating and discussing with the State Directorate of Economics and Statistics, the state forest departments, the state biodiversity boards, important research institutions who have done a lot of work in this area, and also with the corporate sector, the UN organizations who are working on the subject and who have been of great help to us in kind of guiding us towards our accounts. So we look forward to suggestions from all of you, all the stakeholders, and we will be releasing these accounts soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for accepting the proposal of drafting the strategy. It is my great privilege now to propose the formal vote of thanks for the second session of NCAVES India Forum 2021. Firstly, I would like to thank Honorable Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Shri Prakash Javadekar, who despite his busy schedule managed to take out his precious time to give his message for the participants of the forum. His emphasis on using a well-defined framework which helps take a holistic view on conservation and development activities of the country is well appreciated, and it brings to fore the concern of all developing countries in managing its environmental resources. The presence of Ms. Inger Anderson, Executive Director, UNEP, Elliot Harris, Chief Economist of the UN, and Elizabeth Mrema, Executive Secretary, CBD, has reinforced our commitment towards providing the right information at the right time for the conservation of environment. As has been rightly pointed out by them, the use of CR framework can help in assessing the policy measures that are being framed to ensure that sustainable development does occur, but with due regard to the natural capital. Our gratitude to Mr. Praveen Srivastava, ex-Chief Statistician of India, for his presence today, which helped in providing the right direction for the discussions of the day. We are also thankful to him for his guidance in conceptualizing and conducting the NCAVES India Forum 2021. A heartfelt thanks to the eminent dignitaries, Professor K. Vijayaraghavan and Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal, whose work has inspired us in the past and whose thoughtful messages today have upped our level of motivation. Our sincere thanks to Mr. Ram Mohan Johri, Ms. Chavi Jha, Ms. Rita Roy Chaudhary, who could not join us due to some technical issues, Ms. Seema Arora, Dr. Ajay Mathur, for sharing their views in this forum today. Their deliberations have helped in bringing focus on the need of environmental accounts and have also given us many ideas for future collaboration. Ms. Anshu Singh, DDG Statistics, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, has been helping us throughout this NCAVES India Forum. I do take this opportunity to thank her and all other divisions and officers of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change who have been supporting and collaborating with us since the start of this activity. Had it not been for the rich data systems and a richer technical expertise, the NCAVES project in India may not have been so successful. Dr. Shailja Sharma, DG Statistics, Dr. Mamta Saxena, DG Coordination and Administration in the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and Mr. Avdesh Kumar Mishra, Additional Director General, have been a constant source of motivation for all of us throughout the duration of the project and this forum. We are extremely thankful to them for their time and efforts and their constant encouragement. Today's discussion started with a video giving an overview on the concept of natural capital accounting. We are thankful to Altus Communication for this very interesting video. The NCAVES India Forum 2021 has been conceptualized not just for viewing the live sessions of the forum, but also as a repository of information related to environment accounting. We are thankful to all the collaborators who have helped us in consolidating these resources. We do hope that the present set of resources will encourage several other organizations and researchers to add to this information bank. We are thankful to Synthesize Network who have developed this portal and are also helping us stream the live sessions. This word of thanks would be incomplete without the mention of all the collaborators who have been helping us in this journey. UN Statistics Division, UN Environment Program, World Bank, the UN Committee of Experts on Environmental Accounting, and here in India, the different line ministries, starting with the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Ministry of Jal Shakti, National Remote Sensing Center, as also all the other ministries, departments of Government of India and the state governments. We really thank you from the bottom of our heart for all your support and guidance. Last but not the least, we would like to thank each and every participant logging in today. We're just short of 2 participants to make it 800 live participants as of now. We are hopeful to receive your comments and suggestions for helping us improve our activities aimed for a better environment, better tomorrow. We look forward to seeing you again on January 28th, 3:30 p.m. IST for the 3rd live session of the day of the National NCAVES India Forum 2021. Thank you so much.